Good.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode with Reinforce the Horse. So today we're going to be talking about an interesting topic. What are we going to be talking about today?
I kind of wanted to talk about emotional healing with the help of horses because I've had quite a week.
Yeah.
So, in that way, I mean, what is emotional healing? Do you know? Or do we know?
I guess I've gone through a lot of grieving, so I guess grieving is part of emotional healing.
Yeah, so talk about that a little bit. Like, what do you mean by grieving?
Well, I mean, many of you may know I lost my first horse back in March. Grieving with her, that was probably like the worst case of grieving and the first case of grieving that I've had. And there was a time where at first I couldn't accept the fact that she was gone. I literally heard her and I saw her and I felt her and I saw her take her last breath. Like I was there when she died. And a lot of that was like, I guess, learning to accept that she was gone. And when I finally accepted the fact that she was gone, like, it was kind of like something left. And I can't really, like, that's interesting to explain, but it was like a breath of fresh air or like weight that I was carrying that just, it left.
So, I remember in that time that we kind of discussed the stages of grief.
Yeah.
And how we go through, various points of reference within that process. Like, first you're really sad. You go through like a denial stage. You go through an angry stage. You go through acceptance, and then ultimately true peace and healing. And I don't know if that's the exact like technical ones, but those are the stages that kind of come to mind for me. So what I found with working with the horses, and this is talked about a lot in a lot of different ways and texts, and just people who know, like the horse mirrors our emotions and those types of things. I found that the more like focused I am on being vulnerable and actually wanting to heal from emotional, call it trauma in my life, whether it be the death of a loved one, a death of a horse, issues from things like military service, divorce, whatever it might be, like the negative aspects in life, the more I'm open to more or less sharing that, I guess, with and through the horses, the more they're willing to do the same. And so I want you to talk a little bit, like our last episode was on how we love when our horses lay down.
Mm-hmm.
And so just day before yesterday, in the evening, Cody laid down completely, and it was a very emotional process for both of us. Again, I bring up James French trust technique, and he talks about when an animal goes into what he calls an REM sleep. So on a scale from 1 to 10, like a thinking mind, 10 would be this horse or animal or person even would be like really thinking. I like the example of a dog, where a 10 would be like a snarling, barking dog, and he's on alert, and he's perhaps going to maybe try to bite somebody or something. And a 0 is a deep sleep, and James calls it a healing sleep. And I was like, when I first came across this technique, I was just enamored by the idea that a horse would lay down and be so vulnerable. And we talked about that in the last session, but be so vulnerable and ultimately go into a healing stage of sleep. And James calls it a healing sleep. Uh, and he says, and his idea is that when they're in that stage, they actually release trauma from the past. And this isn't just um, focused on horses alone, dogs, cats, other animals, and such, and even humans, rather. Um, so the other night, I was just, I had a headspace session prior, and then so I was in a really relaxed state and just went over to Cody's pen and hung out with him. And the series of events were quite magical for me, but I found him communicating his trauma with me to the extent that I just started bawling my eyes out. And um, I'm not. I'm comfortable saying that I'm a pretty emotional guy, but I don't just walk around crying all the time. You know, but this was a very strong emotional release on his part, and then I shared that process with him, and ultimately wound up like laying on the ground, and I was just like sobbing, and he laid down moments after I sat on the ground, and he fell asleep, and then I fell asleep for about a half hour. And when we both woke up, uh, we had the strongest connection that I've ever had with any animal, uh, bar none. So, and I do feel that we both processed and shared with each other in what felt like a magical sort of way. Uh, you know, past traumas, frustrations, grief, and specifically, I felt like he shared with me his pain about his past, which we only know a little bit about, but I really feel like he, in the way that he was able to, kind of uncovered that a bit. And that might sound a bit woo woo or maybe too magical, but
Well, that's the kind of thing that James talks about in his some of his course.
yeah.
I mean, I guess an example, he's in a video, and he's standing there with this mare who apparently has, I mean, pretty high energy, and she's in a stall, and he's outside, and he's standing with her and doing what he teaches in the course, and he looks over at the horse's owner and tells her what the horse is feeling, and he mentioned something like, and so much hurt, and the horse puts her head down and licks her lips to that as he acknowledges her pain. And so I don't think that it's woo woo at all. Not
Yeah,
only because of that, but
and perhaps I shouldn't even clarify
I
it
don't.
with the woo woo
Yeah.
aspect, because it's interesting. So Andy in Headspace, the moderator or teacher, if you will, and co-founder of Headspace, the meditation app, which I love. He talks about that. He's like, when it comes to like meditation, he's like, it encouraging, and I'm paraphrasing, but he encourages to not be hell bent on what other people's experience is in the process. And he's like, really, the only experience that matters is your personal individual experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's an individual thing. And so the moment that I had with Cody, which lasted close to an hour from start to finish, was my experience. And whether or not it was, I don't know, like, no matter how you want to describe it, it was beneficial for me and also for Cody. And so I followed up with that with a real deep video, just kind of like brain dumping that process and that emotional release the next morning, and talking about how it is really our responsibility as humans to be in tune with that, with all the animals that we are charged with caring for, and so I guess what I'm getting at there, like, uh, I think, trained, licensed professionals in the world of mental health are a fantastic thing for people. I've had my share of life coaching and therapy in connection with that for various reasons. Um, and it's been really helpful. However, I don't think that is always necessary. And we can get little bursts, if you will, of emotional healing simply just by um, remaining in tune and open to the idea that uh, these these animals that we love so dearly share a unique connection with us.
Yeah. And I strongly believe that, I mean, horses especially, maybe this is true with dogs and others, but I've experienced it with horses. Like, they pick us for a reason. I mean, I, I strongly feel like you have a heart horse, and that's that heart horse for a reason. And I also feel like they pick us because of our pasts and because of our emotional state at the time, and they're familiar with it. They
Right,
feel it.
meaning they not necessarily, you're not necessarily saying that, they could kind of like look in a crystal ball, if you
Yeah,
will, or a magic mirror, but more so that perhaps like the energy surrounding our emotional state is like they're picking up on that,
I
they're
mean, at the
receiving it,
time
and
of meeting them,
yeah.
they they feel it, and they acknowledge it, and they it's familiar to them. I mean, Willow's a perfect example. I mean, and she was a wild Mustang. She was taken from her family, from her herd, and she lost something. And I haven't gotten to the point where I can have a conversation with her, if you will, about what really happened. But she's hurt. And at the time of, like, when I first went to see her, I was very hurt as well. I mean, I had just lost my best friend. I had just lost Mocha, and there was a lot of other shenanigans going on in my life at the time, too. And so I was deeply hurt as well. And she felt that, like, Willow completely submitted to me when I went to see her for the first time, and I was like, "You're my horse." She was like, "Yep, you're my human."
Yeah, and so explain that completely submitted, because I don't really like that phrase so much,
And
but
yeah, so, and I don't mean that like I ran her around and forced her to, stay with me. Like, she,
you just
and
hung out with her and said hi
yeah,
and
and she
pet
was
her
tip trained, so she had a halter on a lead rope, and I went to take the lead rope and say hello, and she, uh, at first, like, she was looking at me like, you're curious, you're kind of curious. I don't really want you to touch me. And eventually, she licked her lips. She put her head down. She had her back foot cocked, and and she took a deep breath at a time
she
too.
did, yeah.
And when I went to say goodbye to her for the last time before deciding whether she was going to come home, I whispered, I said, "That's a good girl, Willow." And she put her head down. She licked her lips, like she liked her new name. And since her coming home, there's been a lot of bonding, a lot of trust and communication that we've been building. And
And would you say a lot of emotional healing?
yeah, I mean, I strongly believe Willow has helped me. And I don't believe I'm fully grieved Mocha yet, but she's helped me get to where I am.
And
Um,
definitely progress um, quite quickly through those initial stages
yeah,
of grief. Yeah.
and it's really cool, like, to have a friend and someone who I mean, just like stand, like, she's an emotional sponge. Like, there are times where I'll go in her pen and I'll be like, I can't dump everything on Willow because I can't put my agenda first. She has to come first when I'm with her. She won't want to hang out with me. That's kind of, I mean, what we've come to the conclusion
And
of.
meaning, the way I interpret that is they're very good at living in what we call the present moment.
Yeah.
Like, they're not concerned with time frames. Like, time really is a human construct. And they don't, I would say that they don't even have a concept of time, because I've walked out at, 2 o'clock in the morning, midnight, 9 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter. They're always willing and able and
Yeah.
like curious, and yeah, I don't believe that they live on any sort of timetable. And so it's interesting, like when we start putting our time expectations on them of like, we've got
I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. You need to get back in your pen. They're
right,
like,
they check
heck
out.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, they really check out.
And it's not like, I heard going back in my pen or this, that, or the other. It's the fact that I'm rushed and now
and
you're
not
rushed
present.
and
Yep.
And I don't want to hang out with you, so I'm going to go graze over that patch of grass over there.
And we're not saying that you just have to give them 24/7 all the time. What I think we're saying is that even if you say you only have 10 or 15 minutes to spend with them, it's checking where your emotional state is and where your mind is ultimately, and just being really mindful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, I've gone in Willow's pen without, just kind of paying attention to her and asking her how she's doing. And I end up like, next to her, like bawling my eyes out because like we're having a conversation. I mean, I was brushing her one time and she's to the point now where she doesn't really care if I brush her. She'll stand there. I don't have to be in an active training session. And so I just kind of go in there and just brush her. And I don't know how it came up. I was humming a song or something and she was just like super chill. Like she likes music. And so I was just kind of, humming and I wasn't really paying attention to her until I did. And there was something that she wasn't like, something didn't sit right with her that morning. And, I'm doing the brushing her, making sure she's not in any pain. And, I just kind of go up there and just ask her, what's up? And she just puts her head down and we have a conversation about how we're both hurting. And that's why I was crying, is like simply because, I'm asking her what's up and she's, I'm hurting. And not it's mental pain. It's trauma. It's stuff that she's not quite comfortable with yet. And in that same time, like there had been something that happened or something that I was uncomfortable with, and I just,
And this is interesting to me because, like a few sessions ago, we talked about the evidence-based horsemanship book by Dr. Stephen Peters. Great book, by the way. Definitely takes a scientific approach, and the mechanics and the makeup of the horse's brain versus the human brain, which I find absolutely fascinating. But at the same time, it's like, to me, there's a lot of these like emotional things and like things that can't really be described and explained scientifically necessarily, but they're kind of open for interpretation. So like that situation that you describe of like having a very emotional state, and we're not the only ones, clearly. I mean, I've heard plenty of stories of like, you know, in fact, I've heard stories of like war veterans who have like extreme cases of like post-traumatic stress disorder and other things, and very, very strong like titanium walls around them, just being in the presence of the horses, being flooded with an emotional response and tears flowing, just because the horses allow that opening of that emotional state, in a way that I think is unexplainable. Maybe there's some science behind it, and I'm sure there is, but it leaves me wondering, like, uh, they can't speak English, but clearly they're picking up on our emotional state and our energy, and they're using that somehow in their brain eh, or their heart or their spirit. I don't, or a combination of all of those, and processing it themselves. And then what I found is the more we uh, fine tune that attunement and like actually get in sync with it, the more they're willing and able to train and want to do things like, for instance, get on the trailer and take walks and ride and do all those sorts of things that us humans want them to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's quite amazing. And we've seen it. I mean, just over I would say the past week, it's like the curve of Cody's specific and Willow really, but their retention rate and willingness and ability to train and actually be with us, like even just right before we right as we were putting the tripod up right now, they're completely at liberty and they were just hanging out with us. And until we shifted our focus away from them to do something else, they were right here. The moment we shifted our attention, now they're, a few hundred feet that way.
Yeah.
And perfectly cool.
Yeah.
So yeah,
they're awesome. I mean, I honestly don't know where I would be and like mentally without the horses. And I mean, I maybe that sounds crazy, but maybe it doesn't because I know I'm not the only one that's said that. I
well,
mean,
I mean, sorry to cut you off there,
yeah,
but I mean, emotional support animals, dogs, cats, I mean, horses, it's proven science in a lot of ways, and we'll need to actually do some more reading and digging on that and have more discussion in that way, because you're exactly right. I wouldn't be at the point I am right now in my life, and I'm 40 years old, and I'm just now learning to deal with things, in a much stronger way than I ever have. And it's through the horses and our relationship.
yeah.
It's great.
They're awesome, and they have such an awesome way of like silently communicating, and it's like it's really cool. I mean, when we're able to train them to clearly say like no and yes, and I want this or I want that, and
Yeah.
they're not only communicating like with how their instincts tell them, but how we've trained them. And then I mean they're just always like they're there, and they I mean, there was some sort of quote that I read somewhere, and I'm not, very paraphrasing, but it's like, um, it mentioned something about how the horses, they're just able to communicate with you, and they're very forgiving. And it's like you could do anything to them as long as you mean well and you're trying your best, and they'll come back and do their best as well.
Yep.
I mean, it's all about like, and I'm not saying like it's all about them and not about us. Like I feel like in a lot of ways they put us first too. If we try to put them first, like to me, Willow's another friend of mine, and she doesn't communicate my language per se, but she does. They communicate in their own little ways, and they're awesome counselors and therapists just in their being.
Right. Yeah.
I find
Just
that
being
awesome.
in their presence. Which brings me to something I came across, and I didn't dig into it to like validate it too much, but there was some research done on like the electromagnetic field, I think, of hearts and heartbeats. And so a human heart like casts, a small area around them, and the electromagnetic field of a horse's heart is much larger, and it's actually like the rhythm of the horse's heart is such that it's the same as ours is when we are like in a good mood and feeling good. And so just being around the horses and feeling their heartbeat from you can't see, taste, or smell it, but it's going on, and we're kind of receptive to that subconsciously, and that's why we feel better and emotionally stronger just by being in their presence. And I don't know if that transcends, to other types of animals or not, but at least this particular study was talking about it with horses, and I couldn't agree more. It's just like, for me, I walk up to them and I feel better.
You just like, I gotta smile.
Yeah.
They're so freaking cute, and they're just like so sweet. And they're just like, they're beautiful creatures. Like,
so clearly we're a little biased, and if you don't have a horse, you might want to think about getting one.
True fact.
No, but they do require a lot of time and effort and focus and training. I mean, we put a lot of time with them each week, each day, amongst getting other things done, and so they've helped us heal emotionally from lots of different things. I think equally we're helping them, and it's really cool to just partner with them in that journey, and to be open to how it unfolds. Yeah.
Got a good point there.
So if you guys haven't heard yet, we are trying to complete a series, and we have a couple guests scheduled, or right now we only have one guest scheduled, with a couple others in the works. We're trying to get maybe half a dozen people to tell your story about how horses have changed your life in one way or another. And, we can connect online and do, a podcast interview session with the three of us. And, we want to get those stories out maybe late this quarter of the year. And, of course, we're going to tell our story or our stories in that process. So if you would like to share your story on our podcast, just shoot us an email at podcast@reinforcethehorse.com. Or you can connect with us on Facebook. We're there pretty often. And we would love to hear from you and your story, and perhaps maybe you share some of your emotional healing aspects of your horsemanship journey.
It'd be really cool to hear other stories than just ours. So please come on to the show. And also, if you would prefer to remain anonymous, I know that's typically not how podcasts go. Not too sure.
Yeah, we could do that.
But I mean, if you'd like your story to be out and your name or whatever remain anonymous, send us an email at our email.
Podcast@reinforcethehorse.com.
And we can arrange for that as well.
Yeah, so. Because if you just want to send it in anonymously and we can read it.
Yeah.
We do have a short questionnaire that will help you prepare for it. And we can send that over to you as well. Well, thank you so much for listening to this short session on emotional healing with horses. Perhaps we'll unpack it a little bit more in the future.
Yeah.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks so much. Bye.